Hey y'all, I'm Elisa, the Scrappy Wife behind ScrappyWife.com. Today I'm going to do some mixed media art journaling. Today the plan is to work in my art journal and to pull some art or some pictures, something from Real Simple. This is one of my favorite magazines, just in general, but also to pull things out of. Look at those beautiful, to pull just ideas and pictures and graphics. I think this is a great one to use. So we're going to go through, pick a few pictures here and there that we can use. That's another good one. And see what we can come up with as far as an art journal page. So I will link everything that I end up using down below. Otherwise, let's go. So what type of images do I look for when I'm flipping through these magazines? Honestly, it's anything that jumps out. I like things that are really monochromatic. So when I cut them out, they're primarily one color. I like illustrations and graphics. I like things that are very, very bold. Sometimes I'm drawn to big words. There's just different things that jump out of me. And what I do is I flip through the magazine, I tear out any page that I find intriguing, and then I will go through and cut them all out after the fact. There's all kinds of ways you can use all of these images. There's really, no wrong image to pick out. It's whatever is speaking to you. And sometimes I use the images immediately. Sometimes I end up saving them to use in future collage projects. Sometimes I feature the image in a primary way, and then there are other times where it's really going to be a background. It's going to be something that might get covered up. It's a whole process, but I find that using collage and using these photographs and these illustrations is a great jumping off point for a lot of my art journaling. I talk about it a lot, but sometimes that blank page can be really intimidating, especially when you are just getting started with art journaling. And if you are able to break up that blank page with some images that are already kind of speaking to you, that can kind of break the ice. And that's really what happened in this particular project. I knew I wanted to do some art journaling. I knew there would probably be mixed media involved, but I didn't really have an inspiration to start with. And I don't always. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I have a quote. Sometimes I have an image in my head or a technique I want to try, and that's what will inspire me to art journal. Sometimes I know I just want to do it, and I don't even know where I want to start. So having images like this helps me figure out how to kind of kick off the page. So I fast forwarded this fussy cutting a great deal. As I was cutting out images, I noticed a rainbow forming, which is not shocking because that's tends to be the colors that I'm drawn to. So I decided, well, let me see, even though these images have nothing to do with each other, perhaps I can start to order them like a rainbow. So we have the reds into the yellows, greens. This red wasn't really fitting. I have a blue. The brown cookies don't really go, but I didn't have a lot of blue. So we're going to stick brown over here. And then I had these two really big illustrated images that I was kind of digging that were a little bit, I don't know, they have a similar style somewhat just because of their graphics, but I kind of am digging that arrangement. Do these have anything to do with each other? Not necessarily, but I like what it looks like on the page. All right, I'm going to take a second to adhere everything down. I'm just using my Tombow adhesive. It actually probably would have been better to do like a glue stick or something because with thin magazine paper, the Tombow sometimes is a little bit too rough on the paper and it can tear just a little bit, especially in some of the smaller parts. So truthfully, I would recommend using a glue stick, but not full-on wet glue because then the magazine paper will wrinkle. It can be tricky when you're using images from magazines because you do get a lot of wrinkling because of the thin paper. So we're just going to cover this page and then kind of go from there. I liked the layout. I probably could have just left it as is just because I thought it was kind of cool, maybe worked on a border, but I thought let's add something else, and that something else is going to be white gesso. I have been loving white gesso recently, which is kind of odd, I would say, because normally white gesso is a little bit too bold for me, but I love how it's breaking up some of the images on the page. I like that in covering them up, I feel like they fit together a little bit differently and a little bit more uniquely. I'm trying to concentrate the gesso on the sides of the page. It's getting a little bit messy because it's spilling over to the edges, and I'm just scraping it on. Sorry for my head getting in the way. I'm just scraping it on with an old this is like a gift card or a hotel key room card or something like that. Just an old card. I save those and scrape them, use them as scrapers, and every now and then I toss it out and get a new one. But it's covering up a lot of the images, and so it looks like at this point these are going to start to become a little bit more background, and I'm totally okay with that. I let the gesso dry completely, and now I'm taking a moment to pick out some Distress Oxide inks because I was originally inspired by the rainbow colors in the images. We're going to go with some rainbow inks, and I'm going to start to put them on the page. I'm just using my blending tools. I have one for almost every color, and I'm just very loosely adding them to the page. The images, because I'm using Distress Oxide ink as opposed to like an acrylic paint, some of the images are still coming through. Things that were already getting covered with white gesso are already getting blocked out just a little bit. And we're just gonna work our way across the page with these different colors and kind of see what starts to form. This is the point where you have to just keep going. Like there are times when you're like, oh, this is definitely coming together. This looks great. This is the point where I was like, where am I even going with this? What is happening? It's messy. I love a good messy spread. I love a good messy background, especially with something maybe a little bit less messy in the foreground. That's what I'm starting to kind of consider and think of as I'm working in this way. I love how it's looking. I want to add a little bit more depth and interest. So I'm actually going to pull out another row of Distress Oxides. You can see still kind of in the rainbow color scheme, but we're just changing up and adding a different color over the top just so that I can have a little bit more interest going on, working my way across the page, and I'm kind of in love with it. I very much considered just leaving it like this, but to me, what really pulls together that messy background look is having something in the foreground that's a little bit more defined. Now, once I finished with the Distress Oxides, I did hit this with the heat tool just to try to make sure those were set really well. Distress Oxides sometimes take a little while to dry, so I do tend to leave this open in my craft room. I leave it for about 24 hours just to let everything get really set before I close it. So that's just an extra hint. All right, I decided what I wanted in the foreground was going to be florals. I looked to see if I had stamps that I could use or a stencil. Nothing was kind of calling to me. And so I ended up choosing these stamps from Tamara Arcilla from Illustrated Faith, and they weren't quite big enough. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to try to sketch some flowers. I'm using a black paint pen, a Sharpie, to add, just so that it really pops off the page. These are very messy looking, very abstract on the florals, which I think fits with the background. And it was fun to just sketch over the top of the background. Do I end up covering up a lot of the images? Yes, but in all honesty, in person, you can still kind of see them. They're still coming through in person. I think this just provides a different type of focal point. So there, like I said before, there's lots of ways you can use those collage images. You can use them as your focal point. And in this case, they actually ended up fading into the background, and they were more of a jumping off point for what I wanted to do on the rest of the page. So I'm going to finish sketching out some florals. Perhaps I could have thought a little bit more in the beginning about where I would put my little floral sketches, because the weight of the page, I thought after I finished this one, felt a little bit off. What I ended up doing to fix that in a way was adding a border all around the page. It just made it bring into focus a little bit more. And then I am going to add a quote at the end. Again, I just decided, you know what, this does need a quote. I went to my computer, Googled inspirational quotes, and picked one that was kind of speaking to me in the moment. So you can either start with a quote in mind or just add one afterwards. And the quote I chose was, "If not me, who? If not now, when?" which I love that as an inspiration. And that's going to be it for this art journaling page. Let me know what you thought. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. Consider hitting that subscribe button as well as the bell notification button. I will link the supplies that I ended up using down in the description box below, so be sure to check those out. I want to give a huge shout out to all of my Patreon members. Thank you all so much for all of your support. We're having a great time over on Patreon. October is all about junk journaling, so feel free to come join us. All right, I hope that you have a fabulous day. And as always, keep it creative.